I hadn't seen Alex in over 15 years. Last I'd heard, he was living in another state, pursuing some career I hadn't quite followed, as life had taken us down separate paths. But when I received a message from him out of the blue, saying he'd be passing through town and wanted to catch up, my pulse quickened in a way I hadn't anticipated. Alex and I had been inseparable as kids. We'd shared everything: jokes, secrets, dreams, and while I'd thought that time had dulled the edges of those memories, reading his message brought them rushing back in vivid detail. We met up at a quiet bar downtown, one I'd chosen for its low light and comfortable silence. I wanted a place where we could talk, uninterrupted by the noise of the city. When he walked in, it was like seeing a familiar ghost, a version of Alex that still held traces of the boy I'd once known, though he'd changed in ways that took my breath away. His hair was shorter, his face more chiseled, and there was an air of quiet confidence in the way he moved that made me realize just how long it had been. "Ben," he greeted, a grin breaking across his face as he pulled me into a hug. I felt a warmth flood through me, an old familiarity mixed with something new, something I didn't fully understand. "It's been way too long." "Yeah, it has," I managed, returning his smile, though my mind was racing with questions I didn't know how to ask. We settled into a booth, ordering drinks, and quickly fell into a rhythm, catching up on the major milestones we'd missed in each other's lives. He talked about his career, his travels, the way he'd moved from city to city in search of something he still hadn't quite found. As he spoke, I couldn't help but study him, noticing the subtle ways he'd grown, the way his laugh had deepened, the way his gaze lingered on me just a little longer than I remembered. I told myself it was nothing, just the thrill of reconnecting with an old friend, but every time he looked at me, I felt a strange, nervous flutter. "So," he said, leaning back, his eyes glinting with that mischievous look I remembered all too well. "You've changed a bit too, huh? All grown up and settled down?" I laughed, shrugging. "Well, settled down maybe. Grown up, that's debatable." He chuckled, and the sound sent a warm thrill through me, as if we'd slipped back into the easy camaraderie of our childhood. But there was an edge to it now, a quiet intensity in the way he looked at me that I couldn't quite decipher. As the night wore on, we moved from one drink to the next, the conversation flowing easily. We reminisced about old adventures, laughing at memories that seemed both distant and achingly close, and I felt a comfortable warmth settle between us, the kind that only comes from shared history. Yet, beneath the laughter and nostalgia, there was an unspoken tension, a subtle charge that hummed in the spaces between our words. At one point he reached across the table, his hand brushing against mine as he made a point about some story from our past. His touch was casual, fleeting, but it lingered in a way that made my heart pound. I glanced up, meeting his gaze, and for a split second, there was something in his eyes that took my breath away. I wanted to brush it off, to laugh it away like we always did, but the feeling was too strong, too real to ignore. "Remember when we used to sneak out to the old lake?" he asked, a soft smile tugging at his lips. I laughed, nodding. "Of course. You nearly got us caught more times than I can count." He grinned, shaking his head. "Hey, you were the one who dared me to climb that fence in the first place." We shared a quiet laugh, the memory washing over us, and in that moment, it felt like no time had passed at all. The years melted away, leaving only the two of us, bound by memories and something deeper, something I wasn't ready to name. The bar began to empty out, the late-night crowd thinning as the hours wore on, but neither of us made a move to leave. The conversation slowed, drifting into quieter topics, and the pauses between our words grew longer, heavier. I felt his gaze on me, lingering as if he was searching for something, and I struggled to hold his gaze, afraid of what he might see. When we finally stood to leave, the silence between us was thick, charged with a tension that hadn't been there before. We walked out into the cool night air, standing side by side on the sidewalk, neither of us quite ready to say goodbye. "So, it was really good seeing you again, Ben," he said softly, his voice carrying an unspoken question, a quiet uncertainty that echoed my own. "Yeah, you too," I replied, feeling my heart race as I looked at him, the glow of the streetlights casting soft shadows across his face. The urge to reach out, to touch him, was overwhelming, but I held back, caught in the limbo between familiarity and something dangerously new. For a moment we stood there, the silence stretching between us, filled with everything we hadn't said. And then, before I could overthink it, he stepped closer, his hand resting lightly on my shoulder, his gaze holding mine with a quiet intensity that left me breathless. "Ben, he began, his voice trailing off as he searched for the right words. But he didn't need to say anything. The look in his eyes was enough. Without thinking, I reached up, my hand finding his, and for a moment we stood there, our fingers intertwined, the world fading away around us. We stood on that quiet street, fingers intertwined, neither of us daring to break the silence that hung between us. The world felt distant, reduced to just the two of us standing close, breathing in sync, as if we were caught in a fragile bubble that could shatter with a single wrong move. After a long pause, he gently squeezed my hand, his thumb brushing over my knuckles in a way that sent a quiet thrill through me. "I didn't expect to feel like this," he admitted softly, his voice barely more than a whisper. His gaze held mine, and in his eyes I saw a vulnerability that both surprised and comforted me, a reminder that he was feeling this just as deeply as I was. I managed a shaky smile. "Yeah, me neither." I didn't know how to put into words the mix of emotions swirling inside me, the excitement, the fear, the memories of our past layered over the unfamiliar closeness of this moment. For a second, he looked like he wanted to say something more, but then he just shook his head, a faint smile playing on his lips as he pulled me into a tight hug. The embrace was warm, grounding. His arms wrapped securely around me, and I felt myself relax, melting into the familiarity of him. His breath brushed against my ear as he murmured, "You're still the same guy I remember, but somehow everything feels different." I closed my eyes, taking in the warmth of his words, the way they wrapped around me like a promise. "Maybe that's a good thing," I whispered, feeling a strange comfort in the idea that we could be both the same and different, two people caught between the past and whatever this new connection was becoming. When we finally pulled back, he kept his hands on my shoulders, his gaze. "Want to take a walk?" he asked, his voice hesitating for a moment. I nodded, fluttered with anticipation. "Yeah, I'd like that." We strolled down the quiet streets. There was an ease in our conversation, but the attention was still sitting. A silent current closer to each step. Started looking out over the city sky, the lights reflecting in his eyes. "I missed this," he said softly, his voice carrying a weight I hadn't expected. "Being with someone who really gets me." I felt a pang in my chest, a bittersweet ache at the thought of all the years we'd spent apart, all the things we'd missed in each other's lives. "Me too," I replied, my voice barely audible. "I guess I didn't realize how much until tonight." We stood there in comfortable silence, the city stretching out around us, and for the first time, I felt like we were exactly where we were supposed to be. He turned to me, his gaze soft, almost hesitant, as if he was weighing a decision. "Ben, I don't know if I should say this, but I think I've always felt something for you." The words were quiet, barely more than a whisper, but they cut through the night like a confession, raw and unfiltered. My heart pounded, and I struggled to find my voice. I think I have, too," I admitted, the honesty of my words feeling like a release, as if I'd finally let go of a weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. A small, relieved smile crossed his face, and he took a step closer, his hand finding mine once more. The warmth of his touch was grounding, steadying, a quiet reassurance that we weren't alone in this. Without another word, we continued walking, his hand in mine, the silence between us filled with a quiet understanding, a mutual promise that whatever happened, we'd face it together. Eventually, we found ourselves back at my apartment. I hesitated at the door, glancing back at him, a question in my eyes. He looked at me, his gaze steady, and nodded, his hand resting lightly on my shoulder as he followed me inside. The apartment was quiet, dimly lit by the soft glow of the streetlights outside. We stood there, facing each other, and I could feel my heart racing, the anticipation, the tension thickening with each passing second. He stepped closer, his hand brushing against my cheek, his touch light, tentative, as if testing the boundaries we'd both spent years keeping in place. "Ben," he murmured, his voice filled with a mixture of uncertainty and longing, his gaze intense. "Are you sure about this?" I nodded, my own voice barely a whisper. "I've never been more sure of anything." With that, he leaned in, his lips meeting mine in a kiss that was soft, tender, filled with the unspoken words we hadn't dared to say. The kiss deepened slowly, each of us letting go of the fears, the doubts, giving in to the quiet intensity that had been building between us all night. His hands slid to my waist, pulling me closer, and I wrapped my arms around him, feeling the warmth of his body against mine, the quiet strength in his embrace. Every touch, every kiss felt like a revelation, an answer to questions I hadn't dared to ask. When we finally pulled apart, our foreheads resting together, our breaths mingling in the quiet of the room, I felt a calm settle over me, a quiet certainty that whatever challenges lay ahead, we'd face them side by side. He looked at me, his gaze soft, a small, contented smile playing on his lips. "I don't know what happens next, but I don't want to lose this," he whispered, his hand finding mine, his fingers lacing through mine in a gesture that felt both familiar and new. "Neither do I," I replied, squeezing his hand, grounding us both in the reality of this moment. We spent the rest of the night wrapped in each other's arms, letting the quiet intimacy settle around us, a reminder that sometimes life gives you exactly what you need when you least expect it. As dawn crept in through the blinds, casting a soft, golden glow over the room, we lay there in silence, wrapped up in each other. It felt surreal, like some fragile dream I was afraid to wake from. Alex's breathing was steady, his hand resting lightly on mine, a subtle but constant reminder of the night we'd just shared. Eventually, he stirred, his eyes fluttering open to find me watching him. A small, sleepy smile crossed his face, and he reached up, brushing a strand of hair from my forehead in a gesture that felt both tender and intimate. "Morning," he murmured, his voice rough from sleep, and the sound sent a warm thrill through me. "Morning," I replied, feeling my heart skip a beat as his gaze held mine. There was a vulnerability in his eyes, a quiet acknowledgement of everything that had passed between us, and I felt my own fears mirrored in that look. For a moment, neither of us spoke, each of us absorbing the reality of the morning, the weight of the choices we'd made hanging in the silence. I wanted to say something to ease the tension, to find the right words to explain the rush of emotion swirling inside me, but nothing felt right. Finally, he broke the silence, his fingers brushing lightly over the back of my hand. "Last night, it wasn't just a one-time thing, right?" His voice was hesitant, filled with a quiet vulnerability that tugged at my heart. I shook my head, managing a small, reassuring smile. No, it wasn't. I didn't have all the answers, didn't know what the future held for us, but I knew that what we'd shared wasn't something I could walk away from easily. He let out a small breath, a hint of relief crossing his face. "Good, because I don't want to lose this. I don't want to lose you." Hearing those words from him brought a strange mixture of joy and fear, the thrill of the unknown mingling with the quiet terror of risking something I hadn't even known I wanted. "Then we won't," I replied softly, my fingers lacing through his, grounding us in that simple, unspoken promise. The morning wore on, and we talked quietly, sharing our fears, our hopes, the insecurities that had lingered beneath the surface for so long. He confessed how he'd always felt something for me, even when we were kids, though he hadn't recognized it then. I admitted the same, telling him how I'd dismissed those feelings, telling myself it was just a deep friendship, nothing more. In each confession, we found a shared truth, a sense of relief in finally letting go of the secrets we'd kept from ourselves and each other. But as much as the morning felt like a beginning, a new chapter unfolding, I knew that life wouldn't make this easy. There would be challenges, questions, people who wouldn't understand, and in the quiet moments the weight of that reality began to settle over us. He sat up, running a hand through his hair, his gaze drifting to the window as if searching for answers. "What do we do now?" he asked, a hint of uncertainty in his voice. I took a deep breath, my own thoughts swirling as I considered his question. "We take it one step at a time," I replied, feeling a quiet resolve settle over me. "We don't have to figure everything out right now. We just stay here, in this moment, and figure it out as we go." A small smile tugged at his lips, and he reached over, squeezing my hand. "Yeah, I think I can do that." We spent the rest of the morning in each other's company, letting the quiet intimacy of the night carry us into the day, neither of us wanting to break the fragile peace we'd found. Eventually, though, reality crept back in, and he had to leave, responsibilities pulling him away from the sanctuary we'd created. As he stood at the door, a small, bittersweet smile on his face, he leaned down, pressing a soft, lingering kiss to my forehead. "I'll see you soon," he murmured, his gaze filled with a quiet promise that soothed the ache of watching him go. I nodded, a small smile playing at my lips as I watched him walk away, knowing that whatever came next, we'd face it together, side by side. In the days that followed, Alex and I settled into a rhythm of quiet texts, stolen glances, and lingering phone calls. Each message carried an unspoken promise, a reassurance that we were both still here, navigating this new reality with a mix of excitement and trepidation. The thrill of it all was undeniable, but there was a part of me that couldn't shake the fear of how easily it could all slip away. One evening, he texted me an invitation. "Dinner at mine." The message was simple, but the weight behind it felt anything but. My heart raced as I read the words, knowing that this was more than just a casual meal. I replied with a quick, enthusiastic, "Yes," and a few hours later I found myself standing outside his apartment, heart pounding as I knocked on the door. When he opened it, the sight of him took my breath away. He was dressed casually, yet there was something different in the way he looked at me. A quiet intensity, a vulnerability that made my pulse quicken. He smiled, his hand lingering on my shoulder as he pulled me inside, and I felt the familiar warmth of his touch, grounding me, steadying me in a way that only he could. The apartment was filled with the comforting aroma of something cooking on the stove, and the soft glow of the dimmed lights created an atmosphere that was both intimate and inviting. We talked easily as he moved around the kitchen, preparing dinner with a casual grace that left me mesmerized. I watched him, every movement, every glance, filling me with a quiet awe at how effortlessly we had fallen back into each other's lives. Over dinner, we fell into the same rhythm of laughter and shared memories, but there was an undercurrent now, a tension that hummed beneath every word, every lingering look. He reached across the table at one point, his fingers brushing against mine, and the touch sent a shiver through me, a quiet reminder of the night we'd spent together and everything we hadn't yet said. After dinner, we moved to the couch, a comfortable silence settling over us as we sat side by side, our hands brushing in quiet, tentative touches. He turned to me, his gaze soft, searching, and I could see the vulnerability in his eyes, a reflection of my own fears and hopes. "Ben, I've been thinking about us, about what this means," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't want to mess this up. I felt a pang in my chest, a mix of relief and fear as I nodded, my own voice quiet but steady. Neither do I, but maybe. Maybe we don't need to have all the answers right now. We can just be here. He smiled, a soft, grateful smile, and in that moment it felt like a weight had lifted, as if we'd both silently agreed to let go of the fears that had held us back. He reached up, his hand brushing lightly along my cheek, and I felt my breath catch as he leaned in, his lips meeting mine in a kiss that was gentle, filled with the quiet intensity of everything we'd left unspoken. The kiss deepened, and soon we were wrapped up in each other, our hands exploring, our breaths mingling in the quiet of the room. Every touch felt new, exhilarating, and as his fingers traced slow lines down my spine, I felt a thrill of anticipation, a quiet longing that I hadn't let myself feel before. We pulled back slightly, our foreheads resting together, both of us breathless, caught up in the intensity of the moment. He looked at me, his gaze filled with a mixture of awe and uncertainty. I don't want this to end, Ben. I want us. His words were filled with a quiet resolve, a vulnerability that matched my own, and I felt a surge of emotion, a quiet certainty that whatever challenges lay ahead, we were worth it. Me too, I whispered, my fingers lacing through his, grounding us both in that unspoken promise. The night stretched on, filled with quiet confessions and whispered promises, each of us letting go of the fears that had held us back for so long. And as the hours slipped away, I realized that whatever the future held, I was ready to face it. With him. The next morning was filled with a quiet, unspoken contentment. The sunlight filtered through his curtains, casting a warm glow over the room as we lay there, wrapped up in each other. Neither of us felt the need to break the silence, as if speaking might disrupt the delicate peace we'd created. His arm was draped over me, his breathing steady, and I couldn't help but marvel at how natural it felt, as though we'd been doing this forever. Eventually, he stirred, stretching lazily before turning to me with a sleepy smile. "Morning," he murmured, his voice rough from sleep, and the sound sent a thrill through me. "Morning," I replied, feeling my chest tighten at the tenderness in his gaze. It was a simple greeting, yet it held a weight that neither of us could ignore. He reached over, brushing a hand along my cheek, his touch lingering. "You know," he began, his voice quiet, "I never thought I'd feel this way about anyone, especially not you." I felt a warmth flood through me, a mix of joy and disbelief that we'd finally found our way to this moment. "Me neither," I admitted, my voice thick with emotion. "But now that we're here, I can't imagine it any other way." He smiled, a quiet, genuine smile that softened his features, and for a moment we simply lay there, taking in the reality of what we'd found. But beneath the contentment, I could feel the faint stirrings of worry, the quiet fear of what would happen when we stepped back into the world outside his apartment. As if sensing my thoughts, he reached over, his hand finding mine, his fingers lacing through mine in a gesture that felt both comforting and grounding. "We don't have to rush anything," he murmured, his gaze steady. "We can take it slow, figure things out together." I nodded, feeling a sense of relief settle over me. "Yeah, I think that's exactly what we need." We spent the rest of the morning in each other's company, talking about everything and nothing, each word, each laugh, weaving a stronger bond between us. And though we knew there would be challenges ahead, for the first time, I felt a quiet confidence that we could face them together. As the days turned into weeks, we fell into a rhythm of stolen moments and late-night talks, building a foundation that felt as solid as it was fragile. We navigated the complexities of our relationship, learning to balance the thrill of newfound love with the reality of the lives we'd built separately. There were moments of doubt, of course, times when the weight of secrecy and the fear of judgment crept in, filling us with uncertainty. But in those moments, he would reach for my hand, his touch a quiet reminder that we were in this together, that we didn't have to face our fears alone. One night, as we lay in bed, wrapped up in each other's warmth, he turned to me, his gaze soft but determined. "Ben, I want you to know that whatever happens, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." His words were simple, but they held a promise that brought tears to my eyes, a reassurance that soothed the doubts I hadn't even realized I was carrying. "Me too," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. "I'm all in." In that moment, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them side by side. And though the future remained uncertain, filled with questions we didn't yet have answers to, I felt a quiet certainty that we were exactly where we were meant to be. The night faded into dawn, and as the first light crept through the window, I held him close, both of us content in the knowledge that we'd found something rare, something worth fighting for.